Hey there, everybody. Steve the Amateur Historian, and I'm back in the old town Albina area where I've been to so many times. And I'm actually really happy. This particular case is very intriguing, very interesting to me. But when I first started finding information on it, I really was finding only the bare bones, and honestly didn't even think I was going to make a video on it because there just wasn't enough to really substantiate a video. I first learned about this case like several months ago, and then I went and dug back in again and actually was fortunate to find more information about this case to where I could actually put together like some ideas and the theories that were being kind of played around with in terms of what happened in this area. I'm about to turn east for you. I'm just turning this direction. Just going a block up. Because if you look, this is this big brick building here. This is Davis Block. There's a little blue building. This is the area behind it, which you'll note, looking past this little white building here, you'll note there's nothing there anymore. But way back in the day, back in the earlier part of the 20th century, there was an old dance hall that used to stand there right behind Davis Block over here. And that is the setting for this new, fresh episode of Historic Murders of Portland. And as we pass good old Davis Block, this building was built in 1890. Still standing, one of the oldest buildings still standing in the area. And it actually used to connect to the old dance hall, which would have been, I don't know if it was right here. It might have been because it said it connected to the saloon next door, which there used to be a saloon in this building. And so it was, for all intents and purposes, kind of somewhere in this area and probably filling out. I mean, if it was a dance hall, it was probably a pretty big structure, at least a mildly big structure, and it butted up against this building that still stands here. And what happened in this dance hall that used to stand right back here? Well, newspapers reported that it was a notorious dance hall. I don't know exactly what that means. They didn't really elaborate on what they meant when they called it notorious, but it actually hadn't been functioning as a dance hall for a very long time. I think it was called the Richardson Dance Hall that stood right back here. And it had ceased to be a dance hall for quite a long time when we fast forward to 1921. It's March 12th of that year, and the building's been sitting vacant for several years. Someone buys it, the city decides to fix it up, whatever. But anyway, there's construction workers that go into this building that are going to fix it up and make it, create some practical use for it again. And, excuse me, as they go down kind of into the, I don't know if there was a basement in the building, but into kind of the space under the building, they're kind of messing around with the foundation. They're trying to restructure it, make it more steady. I guess even by the early 1920s, it was an older building. And as they're doing that, they're digging a hole to put I think it was to put like a drill into. And as they're doing this, they're digging and they're gouging, they're digging dirt up out from under the building. And one of the workers who's doing this doesn't even realize that as he's digging and tossing all this dirt and whatnot to the side, he actually dug up some human bones. And, after he was tossing all this dirt and, stuff under the foundation of the corner, another construction worker, fortunately, before he buried it with more dirt, was like, whoa, dude. I doubt he said dude in 1921, but those look like bones. I believe there was a couple of thigh bones. I want to say there was a shin bone. And most intriguing, there was the upper portion of a skull. They said that the jawbone was missing, so pretty much, you know, here up, portion of the skull still remaining. So multiple bones found in a small area. So I'm guessing these guys freak. So of course the police are called in. They've got a full-on crime scene investigation going on now. So they're getting down into the ground here, and they're progressing the excavation because they want to find whatever they can. They didn't find any more bones, but what they found was they found a black comb. They found the remains of a corset, and this deviated based on whatever newspaper was reporting. Some newspapers reported that a pair of slippers, I want to say they said they were like leather slippers or something like that, were found. Some newspapers said a pair was found. Other newspapers said only one slipper was found. So there were items that were discovered in the vicinity with where these bones were discovered. And after the bones were, you know, packed up and hauled away from here and taken off to be analyzed, they were determined to be the bones of a woman. Which that's where I originally trailed off. That was all the information I had initially. I didn't realize I was going to stumble onto more stuff and find out how crazy and bizarre the story might actually be. Now, the police are really at square one with this case. They have some bones, a few articles of clothing, and that's really all they have to go on. They don't have a name. This building's been vacant for years. Anybody could have snuck in here and ditched a body or something and gone completely unseen. However, shortly after these bones were discovered, a Mrs. J. Buckman, who was living in downtown Portland by 1921, but was living, they said, really close to the dance hall, so probably anywhere in this area behind me. In 1914, she was living right in this area, within view of the dance hall that was back here. She said, it was August 1914, so this is almost 7 years before these bones were found. She said that her husband saw what was described in the papers as a young American woman walk into the dance hall with some men. And this woman was never seen to leave, seemingly never seen again. And Mrs. Buckman would say that only days after they saw this young woman walk into the dance hall, it wasn't a dance hall by that time, within days of her husband seeing this woman go in and then seemingly not leave, law enforcement showed up at their house and asked if they had seen a young woman who had gone missing, who lived on Rodney Avenue. Now, Rodney Avenue is only like 3 blocks this way, so it was a woman who lived in the area. It was a young woman, just like the woman they saw go into the dance hall. Within days, this woman was reported missing and reportedly never seen again. That being said, what was this place being used for? If it wasn't a dance hall, what motivation did this young woman have for going in here? Well, around 1912, 1913, 1914, in that span, the dance hall was actually being used by, they said it was like a Greek rooming house, is essentially was what it was. There was a lot of, I guess, people of Greek descent, Greek immigrants, I guess you'd say, living in the area. I don't know if by 1920 that many of them were first generation people from Greece who had relocated here, but that was how it was described, was that the dance hall had been transformed to rooming quarters for specifically Greek men who worked on the Southern Pacific Railroad, which of course the railroad lines, the main Union Pacific station, is just a couple blocks this way, and by 1921 that was a well-established place for, you know, if you wanted to work on the railroad lines, you moved over to Albina because one of the main hubs was right here. So the rooming house that would have been back here, that was what that was being used for around, you know, again, 1912, 1913, 1914. And in addition to this young, unknown woman who went into the dance hall and seemingly disappeared forever, there was a young woman named Mabel Kelly. They actually identified her, who was another person who was known to frequent the dance hall here when it was these Greek living quarters. I guess I could just call it that. She was another woman who visited here at least a few times, and who, out of nowhere, this is, you know, right around 1914, same time this other woman vanished, Mabel Kelly also vanishes. So you have at least 2 women connected to this building. that just vanish off the face of the earth while visiting it, while these Greek railroad employees apparently are living here. And what's very interesting is as the authorities are trying to figure things out, they're still trying to figure out whose bones these are. And they talked to a local guy in the neighborhood. I think his name was like Old John. He had some kind of name like that. Probably just an old, worn out, drunken, former bartender, railroad worker, who knows. That's just kind of the vibe I get. But this guy named I think it was Old John. He, who'd been living in this area for a long time, he told authorities that right around the time this young woman that, Mrs. Buckman had seen going in there, who had apparently vanished, you got this girl who lived just a couple blocks this way who vanished. They were probably one and the same, since these incidences happened, within days of each other. He told authorities that pretty much right after that young woman went missing and was reported missing and seemingly had vanished forever, all these people of Greek descent who were living in this dance hall, they all took off. They all bailed. They all vanished. No reason, no seeming motivation for it. And when people showed up here in the aftermath to look through it, they left most of their belongings behind. It was like they just took off in the middle of the night. So, I mean, if you need suspicion, how much more suspicious is it to have two women really close to each other disappear out of nowhere, and right after one of them disappears, everybody who lived at the dance hall that was standing right here bailed. They bailed so quickly they left most of their stuff behind. Nobody knew why. No explanation was given. I'm assuming nobody said anything about where they were going to. I don't know if they continued working on the railway lines way over here. Probably not. They probably split town. So what was going on in this old dance hall? And it's very interesting in relation to this case, because when these bones were found here in 1921, authorities felt that they'd been here more than 5 years, probably no more than 10. So probably somewhere between like 7 to 10 years. Well, by 1921, these two girls that had disappeared, they'd been missing for almost 7 years. So did the bones belong to this one unnamed woman who disappeared? Did they belong to this other woman, this Kelly woman, who had visited here and also vanished? We don't know. However, one final piece of evidence was found, in addition to this corset and the comb and the slipper and, of course, the bones themselves. That was a ring. It was unknown if it was like a wedding ring or just a ring that someone had given to someone they loved. But it had a date on it, and it also said on the ring, "From Billy to Vera," and this was found in the vicinity of where these bones were found. So Billy was obviously a guy, Vera was obviously a woman. So people started to think, was it a mysterious Vera whose bones they found in this building? So in addition to the ring saying specifically Billy to Vera, it had the date December 10th, 1909 on it. So some people pondered, did a Billy and a Vera get married December 1909? The authorities looked into it, found nothing in terms of people who had gotten married at that time. However, they did discover that in Portland, I don't know if it was really close to this area or not, it never stipulated that, but they did discover that up until around just a little bit before 1914, when these other women vanished and these Greeks all took off, it was discovered that there was a woman named Vera White who had been married to a guy named Billy Myers. And not too long before these other two women vanished, Vera White vanished, I think, 1912. She just disappeared out of nowhere, and nobody knows what happened to her. So we now have a third woman in this equation who vanished without a trace, who's named Vera, who had a husband named Billy, and they find a ring that says Billy to Vera, 1909. They weren't able to determine exactly when Vera and Billy were married, if it was December 1909. Whether they had or whether they hadn't, you know, it's not necessarily, you can't just presume that this was a wedding ring. This may have just been, you know, just a present from one lover to another. So whether it was a wedding ring or not, whether they were married when the ring is dated, doesn't necessarily bear a whole lot of significance, but that was what authorities went on, was that most likely it was Vera White whose bones they discovered in this old dance hall, based on the ring they found and ascribing that to a Billy and a Vera. And I think that was the only Billy and Vera that they could corroborate together in the city of Portland. Which is interesting. I'm randomly thinking there was a musician guy whose name is Billy Vera. Anyway. So what makes that even further of suspicion was Vera White and Billy Miles had a child together before she vanished. And not long after she disappeared, and you know, another woman, nobody has any idea what happened to her. Her husband Billy and their child also left town. Now, did they split? Did they make a run for it? We don't know. He could have been so despondent over the vanishing of his wife and probably presuming she was dead that he may have just been like, he may have just taken his kid and been like, we need to get out of here. This, you know, this city is nothing but sadness to me now because my wife is gone. Or did they make a run for it? The last articles I read on this case, authorities didn't really know what had happened to Billy and the child that he'd had with Vera White. So in the end, the authorities believe Vera White was the one whose bones they found in here. How she ended up here is hard to say, but it's interesting that in this 2-ish or so year gap, we have at least, these are just the ones we can verify, 3 women who vanished, 2 of which we know for a fact came here. And then there's Vera White, who may or may not have come here at some point, all around the same time. And then you have these suspicious people living here, probably mostly men, because they're railroad workers. And by the time the 3rd and final woman turns up missing, they vanish like thieves in the night. God, I just spit all over the place. Anticlimactic. So that's where the official story stands to this day, is that officially they think 90% odds it was Vera White that died back here. But it's possible, you know, it's possible multiple women could have died and they could have been burying them under the building, thinking nothing would ever happen, not thinking that this place was going to get excavated, you know, a few years later. So, you know, the ring is pretty damaging, but on the whole, you have to at least consider the possibility that maybe the bones they found were from a mix of people. I don't know how much further beyond that area that had been drilled, how much further, what is that guy looking at? How much further they excavated in terms of covering the whole grounds, how many more bones they may or may not have been able to find there. So it's hard to say for certain if those bones all just belong to one woman. And it seems the authorities and the newspapers didn't really want to deal with these other missing victims all that much. They just kind of referenced them like, other women went vanishing in the vicinity of this place, so... But even that was used to just kind of argue the case that it was Vera White whose bones that were found there. But nobody really put forward the idea that maybe there were bones belonging to multiple people down there. Who knows how many other women may have gone there and vanished forever? I mean, this is the, you know, first 15 years of the 19th century. Trust me, the first 50 years of the 20th century, a lot of women in this city vanished in brutally violent ways. So that's where we stand in this case of the bones that were found under the dance hall back in 1921 up here in Old Town Albina. And I'm just really glad I was able to find all this additional information about this Vera White character and these other women that went missing and these Greek Southern Pacific employees that vanished and nobody knows what happened to them. It's all just wild. And yeah, it would have been huge, this whole open space right here. This would have been filled with just A huge dance hall! That is a lot of noise. But yeah, it would have just been a big old building, pretty much right back here, just the other side of this building and this one, that are obviously not original to the 1920s. And that's it. That is the story of the bones under the dance hall. Maybe they're Vera Whites, maybe some of them are and some of them aren't. How many other women vanished? What happened to these Greek railroad employees? There's lots of questions that are probably never going to get answered, including the primary question, which is, do these bones really belong to Vera White? Do they belong to one of these other two girls? Or could they possibly belong to other girls that vanished that we don't even know about? But it seems like there was some really twisted, crazy, homicidal activity going on at this old dance hall back in the early 1910s. And we have, you know, the bones of women and missing women reported there to vindicate that theory. You know, I don't even know how far down the rabbit hole you can go in trying to figure out what was going on. The full scope of what may have been happening here back in 1912, 1913, 1914. It's frightening to think about how much darker what was going on over here might be, the history that we don't know about, the history that will probably go forever unknown. All we can do is theorize, everybody. So, again, thank you so much as always for watching the episodes in this series. I've really put a lot of time into them and I appreciate them getting views from all of you out there. And remember, as always, to like, share, subscribe, comment, but keep it nice. Hit up my Patreon if you want to. And with all that said, from Old Town Albina, this has been Steve, the Amateur Historian, with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland. Catch you later.